Okay, today we're going to take notes on adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. This looks like a good place to start for you. So if we look at 7/8 plus a negative 2/5, the first thing we're going to want to do is get a common denominator between 8 and 5. And one way that we could do that is think of the multiples of 8 and 5. Or we can go ahead and do the upside down division. And it's really when you have numbers like this, especially and it involves a prime number, if their greatest common factor is 1, chances are you're just going to end up multiplying them together anyway, so that the common denominator would be 40. So you're going to rewrite the fractions using the common denominator, and to do that, you know that we want to take 8 times 5, so we have to take 7 times 5. Since we take 5 times 8, we'll take a negative 2 times 8. And we'll get 35 over 40 plus a negative 16 over 40. Then you're going to write your sum over the common denominator, because we are only working with the numerator at this point when we have a common denominator. 35 plus a negative 16, unlike signs, means we'll actually subtract them, and then our answer will be positive. So 19 out of 40, and it's already in simplified terms. Let's try another one. 3/10 minus 5/6. So we need to get a common denominator between the 10 and the 6. So if we want to use the upside down division, one thing we can do is divide out a factor of 2. And then, since this is LCM, you're going to multiply all three of these numbers. So we'll have 30 that we could use for our lowest common denominator. So rewrite the fractions so that they are equivalent with a common denominator of 30. So 10 times 3, so we take 3 times 3 and get 9/30. 6 times 5, so take 5 times 5. Now you want to write your difference, 9 minus 25, which is the same as 9 plus negative 25. So since their signs are different, you will find the difference and then make it a negative. To evaluate the numerator, we get a negative 16 over 30. Now in this case, we could divide out and simplify a factor of 2. So we would get a negative 8 over 15. So give this a try. 3/4 minus a negative 9/10. So if we get a common denominator of 20, we could rewrite equivalent fractions. 15 over 20 minus a negative 18 over 20. Then write your sum or difference over the denominator. So 15 minus a negative 18, remember that that's like adding the opposite of a negative 18 or adding 18. So 15 plus 18 is 33 over 20. And then you can change it to a mixed number through division. So when you do that, don't change it to a decimal, change it to a mixed number. Divide the 33 divided by 20, and then write your remainder as a fraction over 20. So 1 13/20. Negative 4 over 33 minus 1 over 11. So the only one we had to rewrite is the second fraction to make an equivalent fraction, and then we'll multiply top and bottom by 3. Now remember that writing equivalent fractions, you're multiplying the top and the bottom by the same number, so it's kind of like multiplying by a factor equal to 1, because 3 over 3 is equal to 1. It's the identity property. So then write your sum or difference over the denominator, so negative 4 minus 3. In this case, it's going to be negative 4 plus negative 3, like signs, so negative 7 over 33. All right, a board is 36 5/8 inches long. You cut a piece that is 12 3/4 inches long, and the saw blade destroys an additional 1/16 of an inch. Find the length of the remaining piece of wood. So we want to write like a verbal model, because we know that the remaining wood would be the original minus the part that was cut off plus the part that was destroyed. So we're going to have to do this in parts, in sections. So you can see that we have our equation, the original amount, 36 5/8, minus the part we cut off plus the part that was destroyed, and we're going to get a common denominator for all of those. And in this case we could use 16 because 8 and 4 are factors of 16, so 16 can be our least common denominator. So rewrite all the fractions with the denominator of 16. So we take the 5/8 and multiply it by 2/2. We take the 3/4 and multiply it by 4/4. And then 1/16, of course, is already with a denominator of 16. So inside parentheses, the 12 and 12/16 plus the 1/16 becomes 12 and 13/16. And now we're going to do the subtraction. And when we go to do subtraction with the mixed numbers, one thing we can do, we're going to have options, and a little bit later in this presentation I'm going to show you how you can always change mixed numbers into improper fractions when dealing with them. But you could also work with the whole number part of it and then the fractional part of it. So in this case, since we're going to need to take away 13 from 10, we're going to have to borrow from 36. So we're going to rename the 36 and 10/16 into 35 and 26/16. And where does that come from? What we've done is we've borrowed 1 from 36. So if we take away 1 from 36, we have 35. That 1 that we took away is going to be in the form of a fraction equal to 1. There's the 1 we took away. So 10 plus 16 is the 26 over the common denominator. And you can see that right there. So with a little bit of borrowing, we can rewrite the fractions. Now we can take 13 from 26, and so we can group 35 and the 12 together, and then the fractional parts together. And we get 23 and 13/16. All right. Now in this case we want to evaluate, and we're going to use some substitution. So we're going to replace the x with 2/3, and we're going to replace the y with a negative 4/15. So we'll rewrite the problem. And since it's subtraction, and then we'll subtract a negative 4/15. So we want a common denominator. The common denominator between 3 and 15 is going to be 15. So we only have to rename one fraction. If we multiply top and bottom by 5, we can rename this fraction to an equivalent form of 10/15. We're going to be subtracting that negative 4/15. So remember, write the sum or difference over the denominator. Now we can see right here that we can change that to addition. So our answer becomes, and I see that I got a little bit hasty here in writing this. There we go, make sure that we have it right. So 10 minus a negative 4 is going to be 10 plus 4, or 14 over 15. Alright, so let's give this a try. Here's a negative mixed number. We could do this one of two ways. One, but it gets a little tricky when you bring in these negatives. So my recommendation is going to be that whenever you see negatives in mixed numbers, that you change them to improper. How we change them to improper is you take the denominator 2 times the 4. Now for right now, ignore this negative sign. It's really telling us that we want the opposite of 4.5. So let's first change 4.5 to an improper fraction, and then we'll bring the negative back in, instead of doing some integer math along this process. So simply take 2 times 4 plus 1 over 2, and that would be a negative part of that fraction. So what that's going to be equal to is going to be a negative 9 over 2 plus, and then we'll have 3, this fraction over here becomes 5 times 3 plus 2 over 5, which will be 17 over 5. Now we need to rewrite or rename both of these fractions so they have a common denominator, and the LCD, or least common denominator, between 2 and 5 would be 10. So this first fraction gets multiplied by 5 over 5. Second fraction gets multiplied by 2 over 2. So 9 times 5, well, it's really a negative 9 times 5, so negative 45 over 10 plus 34 over 10. That's a negative 45 plus 34 over 10. The answer is going to be, I'm running out of room here, aren't I? A negative 11 over 10. So let's come up here to simplify. Negative 11 over 10 will be changed into a mixed number, 1 and 1/10. And finally, with some substitution, we're going to replace x with a negative 2 and 3/4 and y with 1 and 2/3. So let's change them to improper. So 4 times 2 is 8 plus 3 will be a negative 11 over 4 plus 5/3. So we'll get a common denominator of 12. So negative 33 over 12 plus 20 over 12 by multiplying by 4 over 4. Negative 33 plus 20 is negative 13. And as a mixed number, 1 and 1/12.